Well, the St. Louis Cardinals offseason continues to be pretty boring up until this point, but today we really wanted to dive in a little bit and talk about some of the young players on the Cardinals roster that they're kind of pinning their hopes to in a reset year. Which players can bounce back, which ones can build upon success, and which ones may be destined toward being not a part of this young core in the future. Andrew and I are going to discuss that on this episode of Deal on the Cards. Hey, welcome into Deal on the Cards. I'm Josh Jacobs. This is Andrew Wayne. And we're the two of the hosts of Deal on the Cards. Sandy's not with us today. And then you guys know Kareem, who does our prospects for Birds on the Farm. And there should be a new episode of that coming early next week to talk about MLB draft, Rule 5 draft, all that kind of stuff, and then some fun content coming along the way. But today, Andrew, nothing on the Nolan Arenado front, unfortunately. Nothing on the Ryan Helsley or Eric Fetty or Steven Matz fronts. In general, it kind of feels like we're waiting on Alex Bregman to move, and then maybe things can kind of get going for the Cardinals in terms of some of the offseason stuff. But I mean, the main thing they've talked about when it comes to things to look forward to with this 2025 roster is platforming the young players on their roster. And it's interesting because they're coming off a year where a decent amount of those guys actually kind of underperformed last year. And so how many of them can they actually truly trust in 2026 and beyond? Part of that, I think, is the reason why they want to reset a little bit. Again, a lot of that's financial too, but at least on the optimistic side, some of it is they do want to see what is Lars Nootbaar, who is Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, what is the future of Victor Scott and Alec Burleson, Ivan Herrera, Brendan Donovan. There's a lot of potentially pretty good players, potentially really good players in there, and also potentially some busts in there. And you're not really going to figure it out unless you let them play, right? Like Randy Rosarina, Dallas Garcia, Lane Thomas. Like we can name all the guys that they let go and had success elsewhere. So at some point, the Cardinals have to figure out what they have in these guys, and they're using 2025 to do that. So before we dive into some of the specific players, Andrew, just kind of get your thoughts again on the strategy. And do you think it's a good idea that St. Louis is kind of platforming all these young players to have a real runway to play in 2025?
I think it's fine. It's not something that'll excite fans. I think the general audience of the Cardinals, fans, probably aren't going to be too excited about this kind of taking a step back sort of thing, and not spending as much on free agency. Like they're not going to go out and sign any of these big names that we've seen moved around. And honestly, I don't know if it's a great idea to dive into the pitching market or any of these other markets this year in particular. It seems like a lot of these teams are overpaying for a lot of these free agents. So, and it seems like the National League especially is going to be really competitive with like seemingly all of the top free agents and trades going on heading to the National League. So it might just be the perfect year to reset as an ambulance just completely drives past me. So sorry about that. Thanks, guys. But yeah, I mean, I personally want to see what we have in some of these players. Walker needs to get some runway. Gorman needs to be able to struggle a little bit more without fear of being sent down or benched. But no, I mean, this team should be able to do both of these things at the same time, right? Like a lot of teams often can't give the runway to the young guys and try to compete at the same exact time. But I definitely feel like this is a team that's kind of uniquely positioned in a way where they have a big young core and they can sign players or add pieces around them to make them more competitive. And that's something that I wish that the front office would try to see, but it seems like a lot of this sort of cutting payroll thing has to do with some revenue losses and just some issues that are going on behind the scenes that other teams like the Diamondbacks are also dealing with. The Diamondbacks have a lot more insecurity with their TV deal than the Cardinals do, but they're going out and they're spending $35 million a year on Corbin Burns. Do I think that's a great investment? I don't know. Honestly, what is going on over here? This is crazy. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but something crazy is going on. I'm not at home right now, but
they're coming for you,
yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, right? But yeah, man, this is crazy. But it definitely should. It should excite fans. Probably not to the extent that the DeWitts are hoping that it will. Maybe they're going to add a couple more giveaways to the schedule, but again, these giveaways don't really like. I've seen on good giveaway days last season too. Like it doesn't always work out to get fans in the stands, and you have to put a good product on the field first and foremost. And if these young players can really bounce back and do that, and you get an exciting product, then that's great. And I'm sure people will become more excited as that happens. But it really is like all in the hands of these young guys because like and maybe Nolan Arenado too. You know, maybe he's not able to find a location that he's necessarily happy with because it seems like a lot of these teams are coming off the board real quick. Like once Breckman signs, it seems like the Yankees aren't interested in Arenado at all. Houston's out. The Dodgers, I don't think we're ever in on him. So is it the Angels or the Red Sox or whoever? And one of those teams is probably going to sign Breckman. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that market too. But I'm not sure if it's something that people will be excited about. I'm excited to see it, but I don't think it's going to fill their pocketbooks like they hope.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the only way they're going to be turning or at least increasing their revenues in 2025 is A, if they're winning, B, if the young players are performing, right? If Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman all look really good and Quinn Matthews comes up and is like a guy you actually want to watch every fifth day, like that'll bring people to the stands in St. Louis. But there's also a scenario where a lot of these things repeat like they did in 2023 where Nootbaar can't stay on the field and Walker struggles at the plate and looks terrible defensively. Nolan Gorman strikes out a ton and Quinn Matthews maybe isn't quite ready yet. Michael McGreevy's fine, but like that's not necessarily going to sell you like a prime time ticket and they're going to get someone to come to the ballpark against the Reds or the Pirates on I mean, if it's Paul Skeens, maybe, but like, you know what I mean? Like the young talent will draw them in if they're performing. And so I think that's maybe part of the reason they're going after this too. Like I like kind of think they're maybe like I don't think Max Scherzer is really all that interested in coming to St. Louis right now. But if his market doesn't develop, he's like the one player right now. I think logically, I don't think the Cardinals actually do it, but I could see the argument to go bring in a Max Scherzer, the hometown guy, see what he does. But like otherwise, I mean, really, the only hopes of getting fans
in uniform, right?
Exactly, and they already missed the boat once on him. Why not get him when he's 41 or whatever? But and I mean, if it's their timeline, typically if starters they like to sign, but in general, I think for the most part, it's the young players that you gotta kind of hit your wagons to. And I not to totally plug a story from mine today, but I'm gonna do it. I wrote this like pretty extensive piece on Andre Palante's development and how things really blossomed for him in 2024. And I really like that piece. So I recommend just going and checking it out over Redbird Rants. I titled it Andre Palante's quirky path to becoming a rotation mainstay is the Cardinals gang. And I do think there's a argument here for a lot of these guys on the Cardinals roster that they've kind of had quirky paths in their MLB career so far. And they could end up being Dakota Hudson's, where you keep giving them opportunities, or Dylan Carlson's, and it doesn't work out. Or they could be the Andre Palante's of the world, where they really blossom. And like Andre Palante at this point is a legit back in the rotation starter at worst, and could be like a borderline middle of the rotation starter for you, I think. And I mean, who knows? Some of these guys could be regular contributors for you moving forward. Or I think, and again, Palante's kind of a lower ceiling guy. I think when you look at a lot of these young bats, especially in the Cardinals roster who underperformed recently, a lot of them have ceilings to be really significant players in this league. So I like the idea of giving them all a chance. Will it work? Who knows? This is why we got to see it. And I think it's a perfect time to revamp and overhaul your player development department, because if it's the past Cardinals teams, you're probably unsure of what they can do with these players. But I don't know what Brant Brown could do as a hitting coach for the Cardinals. I don't know what all these new hires from Heimblum and Rob Cerfolio are going to do for the St. Louis Cardinals. It could end up being a lot different than what we've seen in the past. So before we dive totally into some specific players, I want to thank a couple of sponsors of the podcast. First, obviously, is our presenting sponsor, 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles, located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturdays. Buy, sell, and trade all sports cards, Pokemon cards, and other memorabilia as well. They're the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars from around the league. I packed this kind of sick Sonny Gray card recently when I was in there, when we were in there, so I liked that one. They gifted me this good old Caleb Williams card, if you can see that. So I'm buying low. And Shelby Miller, one of my favorite Cardinals of all time. definitely go check out 314. They always have great stuff going on over there. We know many of you already checked them out, so let them know that we sent you. And then we also want to thank one of our new partners of the podcast, Underdog Sports. They're our favorite place to play fantasy games. You're now eligible to play Underdog in Missouri as well as Illinois, which most of you are listening from those two places, but also most places around the country are eligible for Underdog. You got to check out their pick'em. It's so easy to play. Basically, you just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players, and you choose whether to go higher or lower on those stats. You can earn up to 20 times your money if you go 5 for 5. If that sounds like fun, sign up with our promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick'em and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go to our description and click a link there to download the app. Remember to use our code CARDS for that first time free pick'em and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Again, a lot of NFL games going on today, week 17, week 18, the playoffs heading up. So again, many of you use their code already. And if you're interested in playing some fantasy sports, especially if fantasy football season's ending right now, as I'm getting destroyed in my fantasy football championship by T. Higgins, not fun. Make sure to check out Underdog. So, Andrew, let's start off with a player who's near and dear to our hearts on the podcast. I did advocate we change the podcast name basically right when I jumped in because I was like, I don't know if I want to hitch my wagons to him. No offense, Lars Nootbaar, but wasn't necessarily a fan of a player-only podcast name. And it was funny when I went to Winter Warm-Up last year, there were people like, oh, you're new news. And they're like, you excited for Lars Nootbaar to come to the podium? And I was like, I'm not like just some like Lars Nootbaar fanboy. Like, it's fine. Anyways, Lars Nootbaar, Andrew, a lot of people think he's overhyped. A lot of people don't understand what the hype behind Lars Nootbaar is. Some people are like, he's kind of a pretty mid player. Some would like to say he's like a Tyler O'Neill type player because he doesn't really stay on the field. Let's just kind of briefly look at the stats last year for Lars Nootbaar. Played 109 games, 405 plate appearances. He hit 12 home runs, 244 average, 342 on base, 417 slug. Good for a 114 WRC plus, and he's a 1.7 F4 player last year. Andrew, I think we could both agree the main thing with Lars Nootbaar is whether or not he can stay on the field, which we'll get into that. But I do want to ask you off the top, like, how confident are you that if Lars Nootbaar is on the field, that he is a good player and someone that the Cardinals should be keeping around for the young core? Or do you still have question marks about Lars Nootbaar's actual ability on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I pull up this stat all the time, and I think Lars Nootbaar is a very rhythm-based player, where if he stays on the field for a long enough stretch, which he just kind of hasn't been able to do, then he's like one of the more productive players in the league. And you look at his splits from last year, as he had more time on the field, his numbers just gradually went up, and you can see that that's not his monthly splits, but in September, October, he had a 986 OPS, and that was as he like started coming back from his second injury. And after his first injury too, in May, he had an 845 OPS, and then he got hurt again, missed all of June, and then was slow to start again throughout as the summer months hit. And that's just kind of how he is. He's very rhythm based. He needs to be on the field for a long time and just kind of adjust to the pitching. And once he does that, his plate discipline, he hits the ball really hard, and it just like he's a very productive player after that. So if he can just stay on the field for a full season, honestly, I'd have pretty much no doubt that he can be one of the more productive players on this team offensively and defensively as well, like in left field or right field. If you stick him at one of the corners, then like he's a great defender. Center field, we'll get into some center field talk later, but if he's going to try to win that spot over, which he does have on the Japan national team, which has two very shaky outfielders surrounding him on the corners. So we'll see what happens with that in 2026. But I definitely think that like I might be higher than Lars Nootbaar than most, but you just look at the numbers when he does stay on the field. They're very productive. They're very I don't know if I would say elite, but like he's one of the better players in those 2 months where he did have prolonged stretches of being on the field, and it's just been really frustrating to see because oftentimes he doesn't really get that run. And you saw in 2021 and 2022 when he was kind of a bench sort of role, like he really struggled in that situation. But once he got more starting time, he would just become a much more productive hitter, and he just needs that to be able to live up to his potential. And I'm not going to make it my bold prediction next year because he would always just get hurt immediately. But I do think he has all-star potential, and I don't think I'm wrong to hype it up that much, because if he does stay on the field for a whole 162 games, he could be a 4 or 5 win player, and that's very valuable to your team, and you need guys like that to supplement your stars. Which do we have stars on this team? Maybe, but we need some players to also bounce back for that.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that last point is exactly what I mean. Everything you said there, I'm in a full agreement on. I really want to hone in on the last point. Like, if Nootbaar's on the field consistently and he's playing 140 plus games, that's a 4-win player, I think. And I think that's a pretty like safe estimate there. Again, this is assuming he continues the production. And again, I don't know if he's going to consistently, because you pointed out this cycle, the Nootbaar cycle. It's he gets hurt, he takes a little bit to get back, then he comes back and he starts off slow, and then he finds his rhythm, and then he's so good, and then he gets hurt again. And these aren't like soft tissue injuries. They're not the Tyler O'Neill stuff where it's like, oh, a hamstring, the quad, and all this stuff. I mean, he's had a few of those, but for the most part, it's like he broke his finger because he slid into a base run, or he broke a rib, or he like slammed into the wall. Like, he just does these weird things and get these weird knick-knack injuries. He's had a back thing one time, which is kind of concerning. So I'm not saying, I think it's safe to say at this point that Nootbaar has an injury problem, but I don't think it's Tyler O'Neill level right now. And also Tyler O'Neill, when he was on the field consistently, he wasn't producing outside of 2021. He was mostly a league average hitter or worse, and I think only posted like a 2-WAR season once outside of his 2021 campaign where he was top 10 MVP. So like, I think Nootbaar and O'Neill are different players. But again, Nootbaar, he was a 3-win player in 2023 when he played 117 games, and it was an okay year for him offensively. And I think, again, part of that's because he wasn't on the field a lot. If you go look at his Savant page in 2024, I mean, even back 2 years ago, Andrew, like, people are like, this Lars Nootbaar guy is he was the StatCast darling. People are just like, this Nootbaar guy is ready to break out. And it's gotten even better since then. Like, a couple of the things in his game that people really kind of critiqued is that he didn't hit the ball like hard enough. He's in the 91st percentile in hard hit percentage. He's in the 100th percentile in chase percentage. So he's literally the best in baseball and not chasing pitches out of the zone right now. He's in the 98th percentile in walk percentage. So he's 81st percentile in xWOBA, 77th percentile in expected batting average, 78th percentile in expected slug, 88th percentile in average exit velocity, 91st percentile in hard hit percentage. He didn't qualify, so he didn't get enough at bats to qualify, but he would have been like the 90th percentile-ish in squared up percentage. So basically, what you're telling me is a left-handed bat here in Lars Nootbaar, who, when the ball is thrown in the zone, he breaks, he hits the ball hard. And when it's thrown outside the zone, he doesn't go and chase it. So he makes opposing pitchers throw to him, put it in the zone, and he mashes the ball. That is the profile of a guy who could be uber successful at the major league level. And I totally understand why the Cardinals are putting their faith in a guy like Lars Nootbaar. But, and it's a big but, he has to stay on the field. He just has to. And I don't know if I'd go as far as to say, if he doesn't stay on the field in 2025, that he won't be on the team in 2026. But I definitely don't think he's going to be like a for sure starter anymore. I don't think they'll be afraid to put him in a trade. I don't think they'll be afraid to go out and replace him. I think it's clear at this point that Lars Nootbaar has the tools to be an uber productive player. And honestly, out of most of the guys on this list, honestly, maybe out of all the guys on the list we're going to talk about today, he's the one who's proven it the most at this point. He's just the guy who also struggles to stay on the field the most. And that's a major problem. And availability is a part of your production, and Nootbaar can't do it. I think his career high in games is 118 or 110, 117 games. That's just not good enough, Lars Nootbaar. To your point, I don't think playing him in center field makes a lot of sense. I think he's probably an average center fielder, and you want to keep him healthy. I'd probably just keep him in the corners. He plays good out corner defense, so that's a pro. And then I think the bat can definitely play in the corner outfields if he's healthy enough. So with Lars Nootbaar, health's the main concern. I don't think personally there's really anything as a player, like in production wise, I'm concerned about. Do I think Lars Nootbaar is like a fringe MVP contender or anything like that? No. Do I think he could be a fringe all-star though? Yeah, if you could be a 4-win or plus player, I think I was looking today, the 100th best WAR last year, Andrew, and F4 was a 3.2 win player. So if Nootbaar is like a 4-win player that next year, that puts him in like the top 60 players in baseball or something like that. Again, it's WAR, so some people would doesn't necessarily mean you're top 60 player, but you're around there probably. I think Lars Nootbaar is a legit player. Then it makes all the sense in the world. The Cardinals to give him playing time too. Before we move on, because we've got a bunch of players I want to cover, and I don't want to spend too much time on all of them. But Andrew, if Nootbaar just can't stay on the field again, obviously, if he plays bad, that's a different conversation. But assuming he can continue what he's doing or improve upon it on the field, if he doesn't stay on the field, Andrew, do you think the Cardinals move on from him after this year?
I mean, if he can't stay on the field, I don't really know what else you can do with a guy like that, because like he just he has it's a guy with all the promise in the world who can't stay on the field, which is essentially just Tyler O'Neill. And like I know that it's different, like they're different situations and different things have been happening, but like unfortunately, like if these things keep happening and if he keeps sliding in the wall or jamming his thumb on third base or whatever, like it sucks. But like you probably have to eventually just say that, like throw him in a trade or something. And I like with O'Neill, I understand why. I see like if O'Neill after 2022, I saw a reason to like move him because these injuries were like really alarming. But it seems like Lars Nootbaar is just getting unlucky with some of this stuff, and I feel like it does make sense to keep him for now, to just like try to see what happens. But after that, like I don't know what you're going to get back for him. But like if you can get anything back for him, I would probably do that after 2025 if he can't stay on the field, and if not, then just I don't know. Like you're just in a tough situation with a lot of these players if they don't produce in 2025, and I think he's shown enough to earn this chance this year, especially because he was really good in 2024 when he was on the field. I don't know what you can do with a player that can't stay on the field, and I don't know if there's any other like good comparisons to a guy like that. Like I don't know, like do you just DH him?
Yeah,
right?
that's
like,
interesting.
Like, I don't know, like you just DH him the whole time, but like you have other guys that need that DH spot probably more than he does, and honestly, some of these injuries don't even come while he's playing defense, right? Like
True.
some of these are like really like odd injuries, like base running or like swinging the bat, and like didn't he like get a stress fracture in his rib, like swinging or something in spring training, something like that. So I don't even know if that would help.
Yeah,
because I feel like most of these other injury-prone guys, like Byron Buxton, you just kind of DH them and see what happens. But I don't think Nootbaar's bat is good enough to do that, and I don't know if that would even help.
well, I think it definitely diminishes his value, but again, if he's again his in full seasons, he's posted a 123 WRC plus 118 and then 114 this past year. I mean, I think he can easily be a 120 plus guy if he's on the field consistently. And that's, I mean, it's devalued as a DH, but again, like if he's one of the best bats of your lineup and that's the only way to keep him healthy, I think Byron Buxton is a really interesting comparison where it's like obviously Nootbaar doesn't reach the heights that Buxton has, but it's interesting comparison in terms of like, hey, do you like the answer isn't necessarily get rid of him unless there's good value there, but it's maybe DH him more frequently, and maybe it's like because like right now, if you think of their like starting lineup against right-handed pitching, Burleson's probably the DH. Donovan's playing second, Newton left. Maybe Burleson has to be in the left field, and Nootbaar DHs more often if they decide injuries are like being in the field is too much of a hassle for Lars Nootbaar. Again, with JJ Weatherholt potentially is coming next year. Maybe Donovan moves to left, Weatherholt's in second. Nootbaar DHs. But I think overall, here's where I'd say the difference. Like if Nootbaar continues to get hurt next year, then it's fair to compare him to Tyler O'Neill in the sense that he can't stay on the field. I think the difference though is that again, O'Neill has pretty much, I mean, again, he raked for Boston this past year, but he played in a lot of games. For the most part, when O'Neill has been on the field, if outside of these two height seasons, he's been pretty average to mediocre, and he wasn't a great clubhouse guy. They had a lot of issues with him getting him on the field. Nootbaar wants to play, and Nootbaar's loved by everyone. And so I don't think it's like you got to just trade him for Nick Robertson bad after the season like Tyler O'Neill. But you might have to be like, well, any games we can get from Lars Nootbaar is icing on the cake, but we're not counting on it. I think that's kind of the direction you move toward. Again, this is assuming he continues to play well. Let's move on to a name that keeps getting thrown in the chat so far. And again, if you've got names of young players you want us to hit on, let us know. But I think it's time for us to talk a little bit about Nolan Gorman here. Obviously, 2023 was his he had kind of a full season. 2022 as a rookie. 2023 is his first real full season. 118 WRC plus, 18% above league average, 27 home runs, 76 RBIs, 236 average, 328 on base, 478 slug. Pretty darn good. Again, he's the guy that pretty much showed that plays full season. He's hitting 30 home runs at least. And he goes red hot at times where I think it was April and May. He had like a 150 WRC plus or better in 2023. And then June, it was like a 20. It was horrible. July, it was back up to a 140 or something like that. August was like an 80. So he was below league average. And then September, October again was in fuego. I think if Nolan Gorman is on the field, in the past, he's shown he could be really good. The strikeouts, though, this past year, he got all the opportunities in the world to play, and it was just horrible. Like Gorman, if Nolan Gorman had ended up playing a full season, he would have set the MLB record for strikeout percentage, Andrew. That's how bad it was. And I think part of it's because he was just getting in his own head and just kept getting worse and worse as it went. And I think at some point the Cardinals needed to just send him down. I think it did it a little late. But I like the strategy going into 2025 of letting Gorman give you 500, 600 plate appearances. And last year they were in a playoff race, and we were all expecting them to or thinking they need to make the playoffs. And so I thought they need to send him down when it was that bad. This year, I think you just let Gorman play. And if he's playing terribly, whatever, he's in the lineup tomorrow too. And unless you've got a young guy like Sajc or Weatherhole or something like that who's ready to replace him, that guy has too high of a ceiling offensively not to let play consistently. But I do have real concerns now about whether or not he can actually become the player that people thought he could be. Andrew, how concerned are you about Nolan Gorman's sky-high strikeout rate? Again, it's not like he's always been that high. It's been a problem. It was 31% last year or in 2023, but again, it went up to almost 38% in 2024. Do you expect Gorman, especially with Brent Brown in play now, to make the necessary adjustments to get back to being a really promising hitter? Or are you more pessimistic about Gorman's future?
I think Nolan Gorman's the player on this list I'm definitely the most worried about. Like, it just, you look at the peripherals, you look at just like his swings in general, his at bats, it just looks really bad. And like, just an unsustainably high strikeout rate. And I think it's fixable. But out of all the players on this list, like his floor is definitely the lowest. Like, you could be looking at like one of the worst hitters in all of baseball in Nolan Gorman. And like there are guys like that with like just an exceptional amount of power who just can't put the bat on the ball. And it's a bit of an issue. Like there's prospects that flame out all the time that are just like Nolan Gorman. And I mean, at a certain point, if you can't put the bat on the ball, there's just not a lot you can do. Like, it's not really a fixable like issue. There's not really anything you can get around, and his defense isn't particularly great either, where it would like make up for any of it. He was a positive win player on Baseball Reference, which is kind of surprising because he had an 85 OPS plus, and his defense just wasn't that good. But I mean, it does also kind of look like that he's getting in his head a little bit throughout some of these at bats to just keep swinging at the same pitch over and over again. And like, major league pitchers will exploit that. I mean, I don't think his AAA stretch towards the end of the season was all that impressive, right? Like, his strikeout rate was still pretty high, and he hit better, but it's just because against weaker pitching. And I don't know, like, I hope he's working on that this offseason, and hope to see that he's better next year. And because honestly, with his floor being so low, like, he's probably if the Cardinals have any hope of contention, which at this point with how strong the National League looks, I really doubt that they'll be in the playoff hunt at all really during any point of the season. But if they have any hope of contending next year, Nolan Gorman needs to be good, and he needs to be like at least his 2023 version, if not taking a step forward even from that. And it didn't look like that was going to happen at the end of last season. But I mean, he's still young; he still has potential, and just need to see what he can do, and just let him ride it out. Like, there's nothing that you can do but let him play every game this year. And if it doesn't work this year, then you have to pivot to a different direction for second base going forward. There's just like, if he has another season that's this bad, you have to move on.
Yeah. I think there's a really good argument that, again, one, Gorman, it was a bad take on my part. Gorman's just a streaky player. I wrote something last year that he's not as streaky as people think he is. He's a streaky player. But last year he wasn't even streaky. He wasn't streaky at all. He was just bad, right? Like he had one good month, and the rest of the year he was terrible. 2023 though, he had like 4 elite months, and I truly mean elite. Go look at his month by month breakdown. He had 4 months where he was clearly an all-star, and in some of those months he was an MVP candidate. He had 1 month where he was maybe the worst hitter in all baseball, and he had 1 month where he was a below league average hitter. And so, like, we've seen that he can have the highs and lows. He has usually I guess only one full season to really compare to is one like full good season. He had 1 terrible month, 3 to 4 amazing months, and 1 month that was not good. It was bad, but it wasn't terrible. I think Gorman's fastballs up in the zone were something real with him going through the minor leagues that people were concerned about. 2023, he had a run value of a plus 11 against fastballs. Guess what it was in 2024, Andrew?
It's probably like minus 10 or something like that.
It was minus 12.
Okay, well.
So it went from being basically plus 12. So he was a 12 run advantage against fastballs in 2023 to minus 12 in 2024. He completely flipped the script. He had a 496 slugging percentage against fastballs in 2023, went all the way down to 333 the year before. He had a 261 batting average against fastballs in 2023. It was a 162 batting average in 2024. He actually had a higher whiff percentage on fastballs in 2023, but when he hit them hard and he hit them far. He actually was a little bit better against off speed this year, so I think maybe he was trying to make some legitimate adjustments to be like, hey, I can't let the curveball and the slider get to me as much, even though he did have an elite walk rate last year. But again, swing and miss was real for him. But in 2024, his average exit velocity was down. His hard hit percentage was down. He still was a 98th percentile barrel percentage and 96th percentile in sweet spot percentage. But 2023, he was up there in barrel percentage and sweet spot percentage, but he was also in the 86th percentile hard hit percentage, 87th percentile slug percentage, average exit velocity of 77 or 77th percentile, 83% or 83rd percentile walk percentage. Basically, it's going to come down to is, can Gorman hit the fastball again? Or a team's going to be able to overpower him and throw it right past him every time? Is he trying to adjust and make sure he doesn't get fooled by the breaking stuff so much that when someone throws him a fastball, it just goes right past him? And I think we saw with like Paul Goldschmidt this last year. Again, his problems with fastballs are a little bit different because he's aging, his bat speed's going down, all that kind of stuff. Gorman isn't like a terrible bat speed guy though. It's in the 70th percentile, so I'm not worried about that with him. I think when you're in your head and you're trying to guess pitches and someone pumps 98 at you, it's pretty easy to miss that, because if you're like kind of thinking about what's coming up and it's 98 miles per hour, you don't really have a lot of time to react to that. And so I think mental issues at the plate can linger for a long time and ruin someone's career. If Gorm can hit the reset button this year, get comfortable again, get in the plate, don't think as much, just swing, just be the player you could be, I think he can bounce back in a big way. But we just have to see if it happens. And I'm not saying there isn't real mechanical adjustments that could be made, and hopefully Brent Brown could do that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a mental thing for Nolan Gorman. And to your point, Andrew, I think you're right. He's the highest variance. He could be 30% below league average as a player, offensively, not a good defender, or he could be an average defender at third base and a like all-star as a bat and give you 35 home runs and be a middle of the order bat. So we'll see what Gorman does. Let's keep it moving. Another, probably the big three right now, right? It's Nootbaar in his health, it's Gorman in his strikeout percentage, and it's Jordan Walker. What is Jordan Walker going to be? You kind of hear mixed reports. Is Jordan Walker's issues the Cardinals doing? Partially. I think we can all agree the Cardinals have handled him in a very odd way. Calling him up midseason to be a platoon bat for a couple weeks when he was red hot in AAA, not a good idea. Starting him on the 2023 roster, not a good idea, even though I was for it. So I gotta admit I was wrong on that. You could look at Jackson Chourio in Milwaukee, and he struggled big time to start the year, and the Brewers just kept rolling with him. He figured it out. Maybe the Cardinals shouldn't have been sending him up and down as much. But then on the flip side, you do have people saying that Walker's kind of resistant to some of the swing stuff. And I get it. People really don't trust the Cardinals. And so whenever they talk about hitting more home runs and launch angle and all that stuff, a lot of people just tune it out at this point. But it's real with Jordan Walker. He hits the ball into the ground far too often to become a really good player in this league. And for the Cardinals, and I think for you and for me, and for anyone who's watching the Cardinals and wants them to be doing well, no one cares if Jordan Walker is like a 5% above league average hitter or 10%. Like, it's like, okay, whatever. Like, sure, you're an okay player, but it's not what we thought you'd be. People thought Jordan Walker was going to be a middle of the order bat who can hit 30 home runs, 30 doubles, driving in runs at a high level. He hits the ball extremely hard. He's a big dude. He's got good athleticism, but he doesn't hit the ball in the air enough. It's a real issue. And if he doesn't figure that out, might not become the player we want him to be. He's still 22 years old. I'm writing something right now, Andrew. He's tied last year in 2023, he was 21 for most of the year, so I'll consider that. He would have had like the 104th best season by a 21-year-old ever. That doesn't sound that crazy, but it's like of all time in a Major League Baseball, if you're in the top 105 of something, that's pretty good. For 20-year-olds, which he was for a part of the year, he would have been top 40 all time in production. Like, so most 21-year-olds are not playing in the major league level. Most of them are at AA or single A and not figuring it out yet. Jordan Walker was hitting against real big league pitching. So I think like we've seen heights before. I think people forget about it. But clearly there's some issues right now with him. He swings at that low and away slider way too much. It's part of the reason he drives the ball into the ground so much is that he's constantly chasing that low and away pitch that he can't really hit, and he just hits it down to the ground. He needs to have pitch. He both needs to fix his swing enough to where he's hitting line drives and home runs. But part of that also swinging at the type of pitches that you can actually drive and hit far instead of just swinging at everything. If I had to rank like Newt is that like we talked about earlier, Newt's already shown me who he is. He just needs to stay on the field. Gorm has huge variance here. I think Walker kind of does too, but natural talent wise, I think Walker has the higher ceiling. So I have more faith in Jordan Walker to turn it around. What about you, Andrew? Like, are you concerned that he's not going to take the changes necessary? Maybe a new hitting coach helps with this, but how confident are you in Jordan Walker being able to make good on the promises of top prospect in all baseball?
I just don't know at this point. I feel like they've mismanaged him to a point where like, and the Cardinals with their top prospects just don't seem to hit any of them. Like Dylan Carlson is just like dead in the water at this point, which I think is kind of funny when everyone was freaking out. Like 2 weeks after the deadline, that he had like a 900 OPS for like a week with the Rays, and then he was just bad, and they non-tendered him. But I don't know, like it just with Walker, I feel like we know the least about what will happen. I don't think he's going to be a bad player. Like I think we saw about as bad as he's probably ever going to be this season, and like it wasn't good, but like for a guy that's as defensively limited as he is, hopefully he'll be able to take some steps forward this offseason with, maybe an actual outfield coordinator that they've allegedly hired, and like just be able to work on the things that he should be able to do with as talented and as athletic of a player as he is. But I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Not that worried because he's still young, but they've mismanaged him to a point where I don't know where his confidence level is at anymore. Like he's been called up and down too many times for a top prospect, and well, that wasn't good. Well, we lost Josh, but he's back.
Don't know what happened there.
What were we talking? Jordan Walker. I don't know. I think he's been called up too many times for a top prospect like him, and like usually you don't see this happen that many times with these guys that are within the top 10 of prospect rankings. I can't imagine, or I can't think of the last guy that was called up and down that many times. Maybe like a Jared Kelenic, but that's because like the Mariners were playing him; he just wasn't that good. Yeah, it's very frustrating to see how the team has treated Jordan Walker. It's also frustrating to see how like reports of him potentially being resistant to some of this change. But I mean, at this point, you just play him for the full season, and like even if he's bad, like you still run him out there for 2026. But you just obviously have less expectations on him, and I don't know. We'll see what happens with Walker. It's definitely an interesting situation that they've got going on.
Yeah, you make a really good point about like a top 10 type prospect in baseball that I don't really know who had as much like up and downness. So that's a hard comp. I'm gonna look at that for a while because I think that's really interesting to be like, I don't really know who compares to that. Um, but there are, I mean, it's not unheard of though for top prospects to come up. I mean, it's not unheard of for them to be busts, so that's very real for Jordan Walker. It's also not unheard of for them to be Adley Rutschman or Julio Rodriguez. So like that's something. But it's also not unheard of for them to be like Riley Green, or Gabriel Moreno or CJ Abrams or guys like that, where like they come up and it's not great right away. Sometimes it's bad right away. And then they turn into something. Royce Lewis, I mean, his was more injuries. I'm trying to look for more. I'm just kind of going through some history of like top prospects right now, but like it's really not that uncommon. It's not it's less common, but it's not crazy for a guy to not hit right away and then to hit right later, which again, he did hit in 2023. Like, even with how not good it was and like the needs for change in his swing, he still was 16% above league average as a 21-year-old, and was, I think, after the call up, the second call up, the recall up, he was 20% above league average. Like that's a real production. So it's not like he's never performed at the major league level, but 2024 is so bad that it's like, okay, well, what is Jordan Walker going forward? So yeah, I think it's really interesting from your point to figure out like who is he going to be long term. A lot of variance there. Again, we don't fully know how open he is to change and what changes he's making. I mean, they've spoken highly of him this offseason, but I don't think they're ever going to trash him until he's Tyler O'Neill level, right? Like they're not going to do that. I do think it's really interesting to have Brant Brown in there, and I like that Albert Poole is his total story about how when he came to the Dodgers, Brant Brown was like, "I'm going to coach you like I coach every player, and I'm not going to treat you like the greatest." I mean, like he respects him like the greatest of all time, but he's not going to be afraid to point things out to him that he pointed out to Jordan Walker. And I think it's good to have a Jordan Walker have a voice like that. I think people really like Brant Brown. Again, who knows? Maybe Brant Brown will be a terrible hitting coach, but I think a change from Turner Ward was needed. Again, new player development department, so maybe that helps out too. So, let's Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, I think we're at 42 now, so let's pick each one young player. There's a couple in the chat, so if you don't pick one of them, I might pick one of them. But is there a young player you're kind of keeping an eye on that you want to see take a step forward in 2025 as a part of the major league roster? I'm thinking more again like guys we've seen in the big leagues, less about like Quinn Matthews and Tink Hens and JJ, but more of like the guys who've been a part of the major league club that you're keeping an eye on because you think 2025 is a big year in their development.
I mean, I think all three of those guys are worth considering. I mean, I definitely just want to see Jordan Walker take the step forward and become that guy for the Cardinals, because that's what they needed, right? Like that's like to finally have a top prospect hit like that. And people I know that aren't Cardinals fans are already calling Jordan Walker a bust. And I think Cardinals, like people that I know who are Cardinal fans, are calling Jordan Walker a bust. Like I know
Yeah.
people that never liked Jordan Walker. They're like, well, who is this guy? Why is he playing the outfield? He's like the worst defender I've ever seen. It's like that's fair, right? For like those fans who aren't like as plugged in as us to like be like, oh, there's this new guy who just got called up. I wonder what he's all about. And then they just watch him play like an inning of defense, and they're like, this guy's like one of the worst players I've ever seen. Like, what is he doing? His fundamentals are all messed up. And I think if he can finally prove that he is that next leap for the Cardinals, because they don't really have anyone else right now, right? Like JJ is going to be up here, and other than that, there's really not another player that they have internally that can do anything that some of these star players around the league can do, at least being projected to. And I just want to see the Cardinals finally have that player, because I don't think Nolan Gorman can be that. I don't think Lars Nootbaar can be that. Like Nolan Gorman, like there's guys like Nolan Gorman around the league. Like I don't know, the ideal thing is that Nolan Gorman turns into like a Kyle Schwarber or like a Stanton or something like that. And obviously, like that'd be great. But I don't think either of those two players necessarily can carry an offense for a long time, because they're just like you look at Stanton's swing, and sometimes he hits a ball 500 feet, and sometimes he's like swinging it like the worst pitch you've ever seen, and you don't know which version you're going to get, and you need a more consistent hitter to take that spot in the lineup. And,
Yeah.
so I think Jordan Walker is the only player that has that potential to carry an offense, and that really the Cardinals needed to develop for all this time that they failed to develop. And yeah, Lars Nootbaar is definitely going to win NLCS MVP for his hometown Dodgers one day, and I don't like it, but it's going to happen.
Andrew, is there a guy outside the big three that we mentioned earlier that you're keeping an eye on? Like that's been at the big league level?
Yeah, I think like Victor Scott, I think is a guy that I think needs to take that center field job this spring and don't look back, because center field has been in flux for the Cardinals for too long. Like they had Harrison Bader for like a year and a half, and then he got hurt and traded. And then after that, it was like, is Tyler O'Neill going to play center field? Is Lars Nootbaar going to play center field? But Victor Scott's like a legit center field glove. Michael Ciani is as well, but he'll never have the bat to really take that job full time and have any real confidence in. So I think if Victor Scott can improve his swing, which I think we saw a lot in the second half when he came back up. Like honestly, I don't know why he wasn't playing over Ciani every day. And while Walker was up, which thanks Mo for doing that, but yeah, I'm confident that he can at least improve from like being one of the worst hitters in baseball like he was last year. And I thought they should have just given him the Mason Wynn treatment, which is just let him be really bad for a season, learn the lessons he needs to learn, and then come back and be a more solid hitter next year. And if he can even be like an 85 or 90 OPS plus guy, then like that's a very valuable player that you've got there, and he's going to cause havoc on the bases every time he draws a walk. And like I don't think. I think that he definitely has the potential to be like a league average bat eventually, but like you want him on the team for the speed and the defense, really, and those are the tools that you need out of that kind of player. And with the young bats that you have coming up, and with the core that you're building around, you can afford to have a guy that's not necessarily the best hitter at the bottom of your lineup, but can do a lot of damage on the field otherwise. That the team is relying on him, because other than that, I don't really know who's going to play center field going forward, other than like an external free agent signing.
Yeah, definitely agree with Victor. Again, swing changes with Ryan Ludwig that got accredited a lot to him. Second half, things looked a lot better. Was hitting for a little bit more power. Again, you don't need Victor Scott to be a 20 home run guy, right? Like that's not the deal here. But he did kind of get into a weird spot where he was hitting the ball hard enough that it was like, it wasn't like those dribblers and hard for people to field, and it was getting into the outfield, but it wasn't hard enough to get over heads or in the gaps. And so he's got to add a little bit more power and a little bit more line drives to his game to be able to get on base enough. He also struck out quite a bit, so he needs to have a better approach to the plate again. Defensively, he's still got all the skill in the world, but like he's still not like totally comfortable out there in center field at the major league level. I think there's some improvement there. And again, he really is. He's 5 stolen bases last year, and he had 155 plate appearances. I don't know how many games he has right here. It's not up on my thing, but 53 games. If you told me he had 5 stolen bases in 53 games, I've been like, really? Like, so that's an improvement there too. I think Victor's a big one. Alec Burleson, first half, 298, 320, 940 or 494 slash line, 17 home runs, 53 RBI, 125 WRC plus. Alec Burleson in the second half, 242, 306, 320, only 4 home runs in the second half, 25 RBIs, 80 WRC plus. So you went 25% above league average, stay at 20% below league average. Burleson, like what's the deal there? Batted ball luck is always the thing with him. He had a below 300 BABIP in both the first half and the second half this year. So like technically he had bad batted ball luck even when he was playing really well. Can he figure that out? But then the big one for me is Ivan Herrera. Because at the plate, he was the Cardinals' second best hitter last year, a 127 WRC plus, 72 games. He batted 301, 372, 428. He was a 2-win player and played in 72 games. Like Ivan Herrera is actually, he's a good player. The problem is, A, the Cardinals don't play him enough. So like, are the Cardinals going to play him enough? And B, to their point, he needs to improve defensively, specifically with the arm strength. I think he's a pretty good receiver, pretty good blocker. Those aren't the concerns with Ivan Herrera, but I think he was like the 3rd percentile in arm strength for catchers last year. Let's see. He was I had to find it a little bit. But it was not good arm strength. And so that's something he's got to figure out if he's gonna be a starting catcher. He still at least has the bat to play at first base, DH, wherever. Maybe he could be a corner outfielder, maybe not with the arm strength, but Ivan Herrera is definitely someone I'm watching where, especially with that kind of bat at catcher, if he can play 120 games, 110 games for them, that'd be a huge asset for this team. Especially if they're pretty left-handed bat heavy. And outside of Wilson Contreras, like who's the next best right-handed bats? Mason Wynn, who was league average last year. So like having Von Herrera would be really important. And obviously I just mentioned Mason Wynn at the end. Like again, Jordan Walker is really good in his first full year. Nolan Gorman is really good in his first full year. Dylan Carlson is really good in his first full year. I'm not saying Mason Wynn's those guys, but like we've fallen for it before when guys catch our eye and then they kind of fall off a little bit. So can Mason Wynn continue to build upon the production? Can Palante continue to build upon what he had last year? Ryan Fernandez had a bad second half. Can he figure it out? Like Pedro Pajes, I don't think he should be the starting catcher, but what is he? Thomas AJC, he had that Mason Wynn September last year. He was terrible. What can he be? So a lot of guys to look at next year. That's why at the end of the day, I think it kind of does make sense for the Cardinals to play a bunch of these young guys next year and see what they've got. It could blossom and be really exciting. It could go terribly wrong. But probably more likely it's in between, where by the end of the year, it's like, okay, these 4 guys, you're clearly a part of our future. These 2 guys, you're clearly not. And then these 2 guys, we still got questions about. And then you give Heimblum a clean slate in 2026, where it's like, hey, Heim, we know these 4 guys are really good. We know these 2 guys need to go. We know these 2 guys still have question marks. Heim, how do you want to shape your team? And can I throw one more randomly in there before we go? Ollie Marmol. He kind of fits into the like make or break year. Again, I'm an Ollie supporter. Well, okay, timeout. Maybe
I think he's already made it for me. I don't have any questions about Ollie.
I don't have much about Ollie. I like Ollie. I don't think he's like a game breaking manager. You know, I'm not trying to act like he's one of the best managers in baseball, but I think he's shown enough to be there. But when he's a player development,
he deserved every manager of the year vote that he got.
I mean, the fact that they outperformed their Pythagorean by that many wins is incredible. They had a terrible offense and average rotation, and the only good thing they had was a bullpen, and Ollie managed it super well, and they won more games than they should have. But he's not Heim's guy, right? So like Ollie's got to show something this year. And I think the performance and development of young players is going to matter a lot for his resume for Heim Bloom. And even if he does well, Heim Bloom might be like, I've got another guy in mind. So 2025 is an important year for
That'd be really sad.
Ollie. I do like Ollie, and I really hope that he has a nice year and that a young team really brings out the best in him and people can see the sides of him that we've seen. But I also am saying that understanding that he had one of the worst seasons in franchise history under his leadership. Again, I would say let's look at the Mo in the front office, not Ollie as much on that. They had a winning season and outperformed what they should have, but they still didn't make the playoffs. And then they disappointed the NL and the wild card series in 2022. So I understand why people are frustrated with Ollie, especially if the Albert Pujols and Yachty stuff lingers. Like you're always going to have people who want that. And I definitely see the Pujols appeal. But he's a guy I think is a make or break. You could argue. I mean, you could also go Dusty Blake. You could go. I mean, there's so many names you could throw out there, but it'd be interesting. So any lasting thoughts from you, Andrew?
Make or break for Mo's legacy.
Actually, for his legacy, this is kind of important. So, yeah. Anyways, we appreciate the support as always. Like and subscribe helps the channel out a ton. We're over 3.1K now, I think, on YouTube. So that's super fun if you guys keep pushing us up on that. And subscribe on audio platforms. Even if you don't listen to them as much, it helps out the channel. Again, check out 314 Sports Cards Collectibles. Use our code cards over on Underdog. If you want to check that out as well. We'll have a prospect episode up this week, and then we'll be back on, I'm guessing, Wednesday again, unless something happens with Nolan or whatever. But appreciate the support as always, and we'll see you guys next time.